Hi, my name is Sarai Cook, and I am the servant leader for the National Trauma Awareness Initiative. I'm also a civil rights and human rights attorney in Seattle, Washington. I'm gathering stories of actually traumatic events and trauma that's happened around the world due to colonization and due to boarding schools that were put into place during and after colonization and actually still exist to this day. Right now, currently in Canada, there's a lot of work going on for reconciliation for the abuses that took place in the residential schools. We think that reconciliation needs to happen for indigenous people all over the world, in the United States, as well as everywhere that there's colonization has happened, and later the placing of indigenous people within boarding schools and the abuses that happen within those boarding schools. So I'm here to have a conversation today with my good friend, Edwin Hato, and we're going to talk about his experience in boarding schools in Kenya. And we're going to highlight some of the areas that were traumatic events that happened within those boarding schools, not only to him, but to a lot of people that he witnessed. And so I think how we'll get started is if you can just tell us a little bit more about your knowledge about the history of boarding schools in Kenya and the history of colonization.
So obviously, boarding schools in Kenya were not there before colonialism, right? And so the first people who established boarding schools, as far as I know, were missionaries, both Catholic and Protestant, and they felt that they needed to do so to establish boarding schools to get the children away from. It's a very usual tactic, as far as I know, to get the children away from the parents and completely transform them. Because if these children go back home, then all the programming they just put into the children for the whole day may easily get deprogrammed the moment they go back home. So, and the schools in general did that. So, yeah, so as far as I know, that's how they generally started. Colonialism ended, obviously, but
Do you know the years when sort of, colonialism? Do you know when it started, and do you know when it's not ended, right? Because it's a part of fabric of society.
It is, and now we're still calling it neocolonialism, and we have terms to describe that. They started. I'm not really sure when the first boarding school started, but I think the first missionaries arrived in Kenya in uh, the late 17th, 18th century, late 18th century, and the boarding school started around 1924. There were a lot of boarding schools all over the country. Some of them were mainly for white people from England, but a lot of them, and obviously they were segregated, but they established many more around their churches around that time. Yeah.
So what made you go to boarding school? Was it an option, or did everybody have to go?
No, actually, most of the children after colonialism obviously went to what they call day school there. That means you go to school and then go back home. Mm-hmm. So going to boarding school is actually my choice, interestingly enough. I felt like I needed to get away from my family.
Why?
We had too many children. There were just too many kids. My dad had a total of 11 children. Mm. So there were a lot of children. We had a lot of cousins at home. And I've always wanted to have a different experience at any one time. So the thought of seeing something new, and geographically, it was far away from home.
So where's your home in Kenya, and then where's boarding school? How far? How many miles, or what town?
So my home was in Thika, which is probably anybody who knows about geography. Thika is about 18 miles from Nairobi, the capital city. And then the boarding school was in an area called Embu. And Embu, I don't know the exact mileage, but by car, it takes you about 2 hours to get there. It takes you about 2 hours to get there from my home. So, yes.
So did your parents take you there in a car? Did they come pick you up, or how did that happen?
Yes, they would basically drop me off, and I would stay there for a whole term, which is about 3 months. And then they would come pick me up. So it's not my parents, my brothers, they send somebody to come pick me up at the end of the term.
Okay, so just kind of take me through the experience. Was it what you thought it was when you started going? Did you get a rude awakening, or was it sort of what you thought it would be, or what was sort of different?
Yes, it was absolutely different from what I thought. I knew they were strict, but even though I was really young, I knew they were strict, but I thought they were strict to a reasonable level. Mm-hmm. But that they definitely were not.
When you thought they were strict, what did you think in your mind was strict?
In my mind, what was in my mind was kind of, like the idea people have of boot camp kind of strictness. Mm-hmm. Wake up this time, fold your clothes, blah, blah, blah. That's what I thought it was. I knew I was aware of corporal punishment, but because even the day school I came from, there was corporal punishment. But I didn't know, because if you're in day school, at least you leave it behind and go home. Yeah. These people are in your life 24/7. And so I did not, that part of it, I did not see that coming. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when was the first sort of traumatic, can you remember like the first sort of weird, you weren't expecting that event that happened there?
Actually, the first thing I ever witnessed was, we were actually new. It actually didn't happen to me then. I noticed. So this kid was playing around and people were supposed to be asleep. That was actually one of the biggest issues, was sleeping, waking up and going to bed. That's when most of that really happened technically. So this kid was playing around. I was in bed, so we were told you have to be asleep. So I'm lying in bed, and then I see who we call the head mistress. So she was like the principal of the school, they say. So she came over. I pretended to sleep, but the other kid did not. I watched this lady pinch this little kid over and over. It's not like pinching like slightly. Like, he pinched the kid, he started bleeding. Mm. Like over and over multiple times. And I was like, oh my God, this place is crazy. That's when it hit me. I was like, wow. But that was the first thing I ever noticed.
And then after that, what other kinds of behaviors did you notice?
Oh, after that, now things started, happening to me, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't matter whether you're a good student or not. Like, they just wanted it to be a certain way, and if you deviate even a little bit, that was a problem. One of the most memorable things was, so I'm an artist, so I paint, I draw. I used to draw comics. In their minds, they believed that was unnecessary. So anytime they caught me doing it, they would beat me up and tell me I need to focus in school. The funny thing about that was that I was actually on top of my class, at least for the first 3 years. I was always the number one kid. But it bothered them even more because I'm doing well in class and I'm not really conforming to what they want me to conform to. Mm-hmm. So that bothered them because I was setting a bad example for the rest. So I believe there was a part of them that wished I would fail so that would be a better bad example.
So how would they make you conform? What kinds of things would they do?
So mainly it was, so there was, so the, most of children, especially in Kenya, the biggest form of discipline applied was usually vocal. The moment an adult or a grown up either criticizes you or anything like that, it's always considered big. Like, people there are naturally trained to respect their elders to a very high level, right? So the first one obviously was, if a teacher doesn't like you, they'll just say something mean about you, then the other children will laugh. That was the easiest one, right? Now, the worst of all was the worst part of it was now corporal punishment. So let's say um so sometimes I used to sleep deeply and I would just sleep and I wouldn't hear the bell ring. Other kids harder, sometimes they wake me up. But if you don't wake up, there was a member of staff who was walking around the dorms. If you don't wake up, he'll just come with a piece of stick and start beating you while you're asleep to wake you up. So, and it's not even once, it's just multiple times.
Like how many?
He may hit you for 10 times. Um, when he's waking you up. So the worst part was just being awoken up with a beating. That like a lot of the I believe that the reason why a lot of the kids were wet in their beds was the fear of not waking up in time and getting beaten up to wake you up.
So would they hit you on your back, your head, your face, your?
Usually they would aim on your shoulder because you're asleep. They'll aim on your shoulder and your back, and obviously for defense, you just turn around and they'll just aim at the back.
So you said there was a room with children that wet the bed.
Yes, they used to. So what the dorms were divided into rooms with no door. So what they used to do is the kids who were the bed they would be put in the same rooms. Each room would hold about 10 kids. So they had at least in one dorm they had like at least 4 of those.
40 kids.
Yeah, about 40 kids approximately, and those kids were the ones who were wet in the bed. But so this was just out of reading. I can't be 100% sure about that, but definitely the fear part of it would, as far as I've read, would cause that to easily happen.
So you think that the kids were wetting their bed because they were afraid to get hit by the stick?
Yes, and also the day-to-day fear of the place.
Okay.
Everything was a beating. For example, if you fail in math, you get bitten. Let's say they'll say anybody who gets below 50% in a certain quiz or exam, they'll basically get physically disciplined.
Like how? What was involved in that?
So I'll give an example of so a math teacher would walk in and with everybody's books. So he just went through your homework, and everybody who got below 50 would be told to come to the front. So with the male kids, it was you hold on the table, turn around, and then they'll beat you on the behind with a stick. It depended more or less. It depended how like how the teacher was feeling that day. This man is angry, or even for personal reasons, you get punished more.
Mm.
So there was no set standard that if you get below 50, you get 10 kings. At one time, I remember there was this one teacher. What are you getting beaten for? I can't remember, but it was something about noise. He just walked in and I was talking to somebody, and talking to other students was prohibited during class. So he walked in and was talking to somebody, and the kids had already learned the kind of person he is. So if he starts beating you and you start crying, he stops. If you don't cry, he just continues. So I decided at that point, I decided to test him. I was like, you know what? I'll see how far I can go. I did not cry. And I remember he counted. Here's the funny thing. He made the class count as being a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole class said, 1, 2. He gave me about 50 strokes.
50, he hit you 50 times?
Uh-huh. 50 times. I was swollen. I could barely sit down, but I didn't cry because at that point, which is something that became very important to me in such a terrible way, I realized the limit which they can go. I told myself, wait, what's the worst that can happen? I knew they can't kill me. And so I chose to just go to the extreme because at that point, I really didn't care. I looked at it, it was like, because I think I was more terrified of the fear itself than I was more terrified of living in fear than actually what they would actually do to me.
Yeah. I think you mentioned that they went too far one time and you let your parents know.
Yes, yes. So there was a there was a teacher. So he walked in at night, and I was supposed to be asleep. That's how it all began. I was supposed to be asleep, but I'd woken up to get a piece of tissue. I think I was either blowing my nose or something. From we had these iron boxes, and he found me, and the guy hated me. His job title, interestingly enough, was discipline master. I mean, this guy got paid a little bit more than other teachers to do nothing else but terrorize kids. So he walks in, and the first thing he does is starts um, slapping me. He didn't have a cane. He started slapping me and kind of not really punching with a fist, but just hitting me, right? And he he basically insulted me. Like the word itself, he basically said that it means childish, but in one of the most derogatory ways you can put it, it's like the worst insult there. You can basically call somebody who considers himself a mature male. We called ourselves mature, but we're still kids. But being told you're immature was so. I told him I'm not, and oh my god, he pulled me. I was like on the top bunk of the bed. He pulled me down, punched me, kicked me, he told me to apologize. I refused. He beat me until he couldn't. I think he stopped himself. At one point, he realized, okay, this is going bad. And I believe the reason why he stopped was because he realized I was not going to apologize. And this was risky. Like, and as I was doing that, I was terrified. Other kids thought I was a hero. But my God, I was terrified. The reason why he stopped it, I think, is because he realized I'm not giving up, and he's starting to look bad in front of, because everybody in the whole dormitory can hear, hundreds of kids, they can hear this happening, they can hear the conversation, because everybody's quiet and asleep. So he stopped. So at that point, I wrote a letter to my dad after that, and my dad came over, and that had never happened before. And my dad at the time was influential in the country, was a politician, so he was kind of influential in the country, and so just him coming over to inquire what's happening was enough to scare the whole staff.
Were the staff Kenyans are white, or were they from the church, or who? Tell me more about these staff. And
So the staff, so they had so by staff I actually mean the teachers, and they were also like there were cooks. There was something they called a matron. A matron was in charge of the male dormitories, and then there was another matron in charge of the female dormitories. And they also did other things on the side to like make sure kids are eating in the dining room. But so the staff was Kenyan. As far as I can, yeah, all the whole staff was Kenyan. They didn't have the missionaries were not there anymore. There were some in other boarding schools in the country, especially Catholic boarding schools. They still had Europeans, some of them Italian, British. But in the school I went to, they only had Kenyan staff members. So the majority of the beatings I'm talking about were done by the teachers in class and in the dormitories and basically anywhere.
where do you think they learned that style of punishment?
That actually, they inherited that directly from the British, from the colonizers. Because as far as I understand it, kids before that were very free, like free in terms of it was all about nature. That's how all the tribes were. And family was important and the economic activities of it and the traditions and all that. So they did. So to turn this kid, to have this kid go ahead and memorize, let's say the multiplication table. I don't know that's what we call it. Is that what we call it in the United States? Yeah. To have that child memorize the multiplication table is an impossibility. His mind does not understand why he needs to do this. So the only way to do it, the only way to have this child um, memorize something completely alien to him was through capital punishment. They would scare the kids every single day. My dad didn't go to a boarding school, but he went to a day school, but still run by the colonizers, right? And it was the same, just terror every single day is terror. So they'll beat up the kids until their minds just open up to everything. So at that point, you can go ahead and fill in whatever you want to in these kids' heads because now they're just automatic. They're not doing it out of their own will.
So you spoke a little bit about the psychological abuse
Mhm.
that they did. Can you give me some examples of the psychological abuse?
Yes. So, like, let's say in my case, when my dad showed up and, and it became a big issue, they stopped physically beating me up. So what they did instead, which was even worse, I think, it's hard to kind of tell, but those were probably the most stressful days other than the days where sometimes I wish they would actually put me up sometimes. So for example, one of the teachers would walk into class and it would be just an open subject. These teachers were highly political. That's the first thing, they were highly political.
What does that mean?
Meaning it would have been very difficult for a teacher not to bring about politics in class. And it's not like a history class, it would be even mathematics. And somebody would just talk about something, a current event that's happening. So the political party which my dad was, they didn't like the political party my dad was in. So the teacher would walk in, go on with the class and say, oh, have you guys heard what's happening in a certain region of Kenya? And like it's so terrible. Some of you guys, I know he's talking about me. He's saying all he's saying because my dad is in that political party. And I would see him glancing at me once in a while to see my reaction. Right? So they would do that. Or they had this assumption that we were rich. So the teacher would say, oh, I know some of us here don't even need to work so hard because they know your lives are set, So that would be over and over. Some of the teachers were good, they were not like that. Like you'd have in one class, you'd have like 7 teachers coming in within a week, 2 of them would be okay.
Okay. Can you tell me what ages were you when you went and then when you left?
So I think the first time I went to boarding school was 1995. So I think I was about 10.
10 years old?
Yeah.
And then what was the last age or how many years did you spend there?
In primary school, boarding was from 95 to 2000. About 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so even when you would leave the school or even there, we talked a little bit about trauma responses and what those are like and how those look. Can you identify with any of those trauma responses that you would have lingering from the experiences that you had in the boarding school?
Yes.
Even then, during that period, and then going forward.
The first thing was, and the most evident thing that I didn't even have to know much about the subject to realize it's an issue, were dreams, right? Even today, as an adult, I still at least once a week, I can definitely remember a day when all my dreams are about boarding school. And if somebody wakes me up, even today, if somebody like taps my shoulder, I wake up scared. And then I calm down. It's gotten better, but the dreams are still there. So I always dream like there's an exam coming up or something like that, and I'm not gonna get good scores. The exam comes and I can't, and I don't understand anything written down. And mainly I'm afraid because if I don't hit a certain percentage, what would follow was a beating. So the dreams and I do suffer from night terrors, but I don't know whether that's what causes it. Apparently, I've read somewhere it's a little bit more complicated than that. So that's when I go to sleep, my eyes are open, but I can't move, and I just hear loud noises all the time. so that happens, but somebody said it's basically mental fatigue, but it doesn't happen to other people. It happens quite a lot to me.
So I met you in like 2010. So we've known each other about 11 years.
Uh-huh.
So in the last 11 years, I think I've moved about 30 times from a different apartment to a different apartment. And that I know that for me, that stems from early childhood trauma that I have, and not being in one place, and just all feeling like starting to feel uncomfortable, and that I need to move again, or I need to go find something new. So in those last 11 years, about how many times have you moved, either states or apartments within the state? Because I'm just curious to see, because I know you moved too, and I moved more than you.
Yeah.
So
Well,
do you think that has anything to do with it?
to be quite honest, I'm not sure. I have moved quite often, especially from place to place.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't think I've stayed at one place more than 3 years. I don't think I've stayed. And then I've moved. I moved from Kansas City, went to Nebraska. From Nebraska, moved on to Florida. But I don't know whether that has. I honestly can't tell. Yeah, I honestly can't tell.
How do you think it's affected your relationship? Because, like for me, I'm always attracted to other people that have high levels of trauma. And I didn't know that till recently, but it's like now that I look back, and the trauma responses and the trauma bonding that I have with other people, I recognize it now, that I'm always like in relationships with other people that have high levels of trauma. Do you find yourself in those same types of relationships? They might have some kind of mental health issues, or just like trauma responses, or inability to attach properly in a relationship.
Actually, I believe that's exactly the case. That has exactly been my experience. Yes, including next wave of mine who with bipolar disorder, and I also noticed that I feel a lot of empathy when I see, um, like when I see a woman going through a hard time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it ended up in a situation where I'm trying to help somebody, and then it ends up being a relationship where somebody's having a hard time, and so that may actually be the case, that I do tend to be attracted to people. So I think that in my mind, I'll think that I'm assisting them or something like that, but it's actually attraction technically. They actually think about it clearly. Yeah, it is actually attraction.
All right. Well, thank you for doing this interview. I hope this raises awareness just around the world about boarding schools, colonization, boarding schools, and the types of events that happen within boarding schools, and their long-term effects on people's health and wellness and stability, relationships, all kinds of lingering issues that those of us that have a lot of early childhood trauma have to deal with, and we'll be dealing with for the rest of our lives. But we just hope to raise the awareness so that other people also don't feel alone. And also, I also really believe that a reconciliation needs to happen around the world for these atrocities, basically these abuses that happen to us as children. So thank you. Is there any parting words that you want to say, or any? Can you say your tribe? What tribe you're from?
Yes, my tribe is called Kikuyu.
Kikuyu.
Yeah, that's Kikuyu. Yes. But yeah, I mean, personally, as we had actually discussed before, I really never thought that um, that that I was going through trauma. It didn't occur to me, because mainly this was happening to a lot of people. So I wouldn't think I was. And the interesting part is something I told you earlier, that there are some Kenyans who went to these schools that came to the United States, but majority of them obviously remain in Kenya. The ones who remain in Kenya, for some reason, they still believe that was necessary. And some of them actually took their kids back to the same school where they went through all of this.
Yeah.
But I think being exposed to a different culture in the United States, or some of the students went to other countries, France and China. So being exposed to a different culture, now you know this was abuse, this was terrible, this was sadistic. And the fact that this went on for like at least 5 years for most kids, that was, I wouldn't wish anybody to go through anything like that. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.